Invincible is an adult animated Amazon TV show about a young boy becoming a superhero under his ultra-powerful dad, and I did not watch it. To be honest, from the outside this show seems like a mix of basic superhero origin story and what if Superman was evil. And all I thought was, sure, it might be good, but it's not a huge deal if I miss out. Then Season 2 rolled around and I caved. It really did look fun, and while I had already spoiled nearly everything to myself thinking I would never watch it, as I do with way too many things, I was ready to binge watch Season 1 to prepare myself for Season 2 so I could experience it along with everyone who's been waiting. So I did just that. In about 3 or 4 days, I watched the 8 episodes in Season 1, and I'm here to talk about it because I have a lot to say. This show is very good at subverting your expectations and transforming things you've already seen before into something new, so of course there's a good amount to be discussed. But with the way this show is, I really can't avoid spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, don't make the same mistake I did. If you're somehow lucky enough to have avoided spoilers for this show for the past 2 years, don't ruin it here. So I'm gonna give you a quick 3, 2, 1, and let's get going. One thing from the outside that people seem to really love and were constantly raving about were the characters. And honestly, yeah, they were right. The Grayson family are kind of carrying the show, because each of their relationships with each other are like some of the most interesting. Mark is such a damn compelling lead because off the bat, you have 2 qualities that like every hero has, where they get back up after a tough fight, or they're thrown in way over their head, and Mark has both of those like maxed out. Mark unironically gets some of the most brutal beatdowns I've ever seen any superhero get, and the next day he's fine. And while sometimes it is a little awkward when he doesn't even have like a spot of blood in the episode right after he actually gets pushed to the brink of death, I think it really does add to like how strong his will is. He really doesn't quit. Hell, even after getting his shit rocked by his dad, who he had been training under the entire show, he like stands up and goes back to fighting. I like that Mark feels like kind of a standard superhero. You know, you can't save everyone, but he's trying to save everyone. He is a really good guy. And then you just throw him into the worst situation anyone could ever be in their entire life. He's a really great lead, and he's really easy to root for too. Mark's mom, Debbie, was kind of surprisingly amazing to me. I didn't hear as much buzz about her character, but I really think she has the best subplot in the entire show. I haven't mentioned it yet, but obviously you know that this show is bloody as hell. It's cartoonishly bloody, it's over the top. And even with that, Debbie's plots can feel just as brutal. The show tends to use these horrifying deaths to bring emotional weight, but this plot shows that they can just do regular emotional weight. You don't need to see intestines fall out to be disturbed by how sad this plot is. She spends the entire plot finding out that he killed his coworkers brutally because he doesn't care about them, and he doesn't care about anyone on Earth, including her, and he sees her as more of a pet than his wife, and by the end you can tell that she still cares about him. I mean, hell, I might just go as far as to say that this plot is the most brutal in the entire show, but I don't know, maybe that's pushing it. You're probably expecting me to talk about Omni-Man here, but I'm gonna wait a bit. Before I get into the big guy, I kinda wanna clean up on some of the other cast. I think Eve is a great character to not really make this show so depressing. It's honestly kind of nice that Eve doesn't even really get hurt that much in this show, like at all. She mostly gets off scot-free, and she gets to just go around saving people, being a good person. Obviously she has problems, but she kind of deals with most of those at the beginning of the show and then spends the rest of the season coasting. It's always nice when we cut from Omni-Man like actually obliterating an entire planet to Eve like chilling to a nice pop song. That's not to say she's not doing anything in this show. I think her powers are very cool, but mostly what I like about Eve is that I'm just having a good time watching her. And I think her special was also a good time. 7 out of 10. Pretty good. Moving on from Eve, I really like Cecil. I think Cecil could have been a pretty boring side character, but his plot became very interesting, especially in the second half. And that scene with Omni-Man, where he's like teleporting all around and avoiding all of his punches, that might be the first time that Omni-Man has not looked like the coolest person in the scene. So yeah, Cecil's great, and I also gotta give a shout out to his right-hand man, Donald. He is a legend, and he went out like one. The very last shout out I want to give is to a very minor character who I want to see be like a major character, or at the very least return, and that's Battle Beast. You'll notice that my favorite episodes tend to be the ones where people get fucked up the most, and that's basically all that Battle Beast does. He just enters episode 5 as a seemingly minor character, and then like brutalizes 3 guys back to back to back, one of them being Mark, and then leaves, and he never shows up again. He genuinely might be the only character in the show that could stand toe-to-toe with Omni-Man, who I'm finally going to talk about. I've been talking about characters for a while now, but Nolan is like a presence. That might sound corny, but like if you've watched the show, you realize how truly unbeatable he seems. I mentioned the what if Superman was bad trope, and there's a lot of characters out there who are basically what if Superman was bad, but I feel like Nolan really surpasses that. He doesn't just feel like bad Superman, because Omni-Man is so much of a character, and so iconic at this point, that he is Omni-Man. He's not bad Superman, he's just Omni-Man. If you did like a top 10 most hateful, disturbed, hilariously evil lines in the show, pretty much all of them would come from Nolan in episodes 7 and 8. In the new Season 2 trailer, he says one line, and it's, "You should have died at birth," and that doesn't even feel new for him. Omni-Man is the character that I knew the most about before entering this show because everyone couldn't stop talking about him. And I was the most excited for his character going into this show, and now I'm coming out of this show, and I can't stop talking about him. Murdering the Guardians, brutalizing Mark, hell, even when he punches a hole in the wall, it's terrifying because he could do that with one finger. The guy is really scary. And he's voiced by J.K. Simmons. It's perfect. I do want to mention that not only are the Grayson family my 3 favorite characters, but I would also say that they give the 3 best performances, voice-wise, in the entire show. And while I think Steven Yeun is doing amazing at shaping Invincible, and Sandra Oh is giving so much emotion to Debbie, J.K. Simmons is making this show. I genuinely think that not only would there be no Invincible without Omni-Man, there would be no Invincible without J.K. Simmons. The guy is on another level, and for people who have been raving about Omni-Man for 2 years now, I gotta say, I get it. Okay, there's a lot I want to say about Nolan, but I'm done being his #1 fan. I gotta move on to other stuff. I genuinely have a lot more to talk about. And first up is fight scenes. I mentioned earlier that the bloodiness and brutality adds to the emotional weight, and I want to restate that because it really is true. It could come off as, oh my god, that guy's head just exploded, mindless violence, but instead it's more like, Jesus, that was painful. The show is able to get creative with its deaths or even just its injuries to make each one feel more cruel than the last. I mean, hell, you think Mark really is invincible up until episode 5, and then in episode 5 he gets his fucking guts ripped open. I really love how the show can make you realize how much genuine pain the characters are going through when they are hit so hard. At the same time, I kind of feel like the recovery periods are rushed, like every time that they happen, especially after episode 5, with all 3 characters who got their asses beaten, recovering really fast. But with an 8-episode season, I get that they just want to get back into the action. That's fair. Okay, so I have been praising the show for basically the entire video, but now it is time to get into what I would say is a negative. I said early on that this show is really good at, changing something that you've seen before into something new and inventive, and there's one spot where I really feel like they didn't do it that well. Mark's whole trying to hide his superhero identity shtick in this season is just really basic. It feels like it's been done a million times before, and Amber really doesn't make it any better. People are pretty hard on Amber overall. I think that she's not as bad as everyone makes her out to be. It's not like she's ruining the show. But the reveal in episode 7 that she knew Mark was invincible the entire time recontextualizes everything that she does throughout the season and just makes her seem very confusingly annoying. In episode 6, she gets mad at Mark for running away from a dangerous situation, which is already kinda strange, but then you learn that she knew that he was saving them, and it just becomes even weirder. But even outside of that, the trying to hide your superhero identity arc was the least invested I ever was in this show. Another arc I didn't really care for revolves around the Guardians of the Globe team. The second iteration of the Guardians is actually pretty fun overall. At the beginning I wasn't really feeling them, but after a while I think they're just a fun group. But their leader, a robot named Robot, has this very weirdly long, drawn out, strangely important subplot that just takes up way too much time. He hires the Mauler twins, who I actually really like, to make a human body so that he can put his brain into the human body and then control the robots from the outside, and I just don't really care. We don't really know what the hell Robot is doing until the second to last episode, and so the majority of his plot is carried out over the last 2 episodes, which are also conveniently entirely about Mark and Nolan. This leads to the climax of the main story constantly being interrupted by whatever the hell Robot is doing on the side, and it just makes me think, why is this plot happening now? In episode 7, it takes up way too much time, and then in episode 8, they realize they actually genuinely can't do anything with it because it would take up too much time again, and so they decide to just kind of ditch it after the first 5 minutes. This plot is really awkward, and I honestly think I would have liked Robot more if he did less. I'm not entirely against the plot being in the show at all, but it's just really awkward in the place that it is. I don't like it. The final negative to address is one that I don't really think is that bad, at least as bad as people make it out to be, which is the animation. Sure, you get these really goofy running cycles, and sometimes people in the background of shots will just kind of be standing there, but it's not that distracting to me. I think the thing preventing it from being a huge problem to me is that the character designs are actually great. I absolutely love the design for Mark's suit. I think it's immediately iconic. A more minor character that I think looks great is War Woman, and her mace as her weapon is a great addition. And I also appreciate that a good amount of the characters are made to look like their voice actors. I think that's cool. So overall, I can see where people are coming from with the animation, but I think it's overhated. However, at the same time, it's definitely not top-notch, and I would love to see it improved upon in the later seasons. I'm all for that. Alright, so we finished up the negatives. I would like to return to a positive so we can end this off. And I think it's only fitting that we're going to talk about the finale. The finale's gotta be my favorite episode. It's able to blend those brutal, disturbing fights with some of the best character building and emotion in the entire season. It picks up right where we left off in episode 7, with Mark finally discovering that his father is a fucking genocidal maniac, and then we just kinda get 20 minutes of Mark recreating the title sequence by progressively getting bloodier. It's hard to top the beating that Mark took in episode 5, and this does that physically, but it also does it emotionally because this is the payoff to the whole thing. This is where Mark finally realizes that his father is crazy, and then his father beats the hell out of him. Mark is the hero, Nolan is the villain, and this is where they finally fight after all this time. They haven't done this before, and clearly, it does not go well for Mark. Nolan delivers everything in this episode. You get Think Mark, you get the pet line, you get the goddamn train sequence. It's crazy to say, but this is the essential episode of the series because it gives you everything that the series has to offer. And all of that in only half of the runtime. After Little League saves Mark's life, we kind of spend the remainder of the episode just showing that the world is not normal anymore. I really do like the idea of having like half of the episode just be falling action for the entire season. It does go on a bit long. I think a couple minutes could have been shaved off, but it's no big deal. It really doesn't matter that much. Plus moments like Mark walking in on Debbie crying, or the Guardians cleaning off the blood on the wall, that gets to me. I really like that. Splitting this episode down the middle is very smart because the first half is so grueling and aggressive that it feels longer than it is, and then when it's over you realize there's so much more to be wrapped up, and you spend basically the last half of this episode just reeling. I would definitely say that episode 7 is more scary than this one is, but this is just unsettling. I think the back half of this episode really confirms what I said earlier. Omni-Man is a presence, and even when he's not there, it's frightening. Anyways, this show was a good time. The way I talk about it, it seems like watching Omni-Man for a second is like a saw trap, but it's just really fun. From the outside, it seems like this show is pretty standard, but it really is doing something different. I know it's adapted from a comic, but I haven't read the comic, so I'm just going to judge the show by itself, and I'd say it's an 8 out of 10. Also, if you're interested, I ranked the episodes, so here's that. And so yeah, with that finish, that's the Invincible experience. I just got it, and I liked it. I'm definitely quite excited for Season 2, because if it's better than this season, I mean, that's going to be damn fun. The general takeaway I got from the show is that it is really good, but it feels like a show that could be even better, and that is very enticing. So with that, I will leave you, and I hope that you will join me for Invincible Season 2 in November. I am very excited for more Invincible, and I'm very, very excited for more Omni-Man.